The massive space station floated in the void between stars, its crystalline walls gleaming under the light of distant suns. Inside the Grand Assembly Hall, representatives from hundreds of worlds sat in perfect silence. The air itself seemed to vibrate with tension as Admiral Kexthul of the Zephyrian Empire stepped onto the speaking platform. The Admiral was an imposing figure, even by alien standards. His body was covered in dark scales that shifted color with his emotions, and his forearms moved with deadly grace. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 3,000 years of conquest. Gathered species of the galaxy, Kexthul began, his words translated instantly into hundreds of languages. Today marks another year of Zephyrian supremacy, another year where no force in this galaxy has dared to challenge our might. The alien delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some had witnessed their homeworlds burn under Zephyrian plasma fire. Others had surrendered before the first shot was fired, choosing slavery over extinction. "Let me remind you all of our recent victories," the Admiral continued, his scales turning a deeper shade of crimson. The Vortani thought their hive mind would give them an advantage. They lasted 4 months. The Nixari believed their quantum computers could outthink our bio-neural networks. 5 months of struggle before they begged for mercy. A low murmur ran through the assembly. The Nixari delegate, a thin blue creature with multiple eyes, looked down at the floor in shame. Even the mighty Bruthan warriors, who claimed death before dishonor, fell to their knees after 3 months of warfare. Their proud battle fleets now serve as scrap metal orbiting their conquered worlds. The Admiral's voice grew louder, filled with the confidence that came from never knowing defeat. "Our bioships adapt to any weapon, heal from any wound, and learn from every battle. We have conquered 47 star systems using the same proven methods: plasma bombardment that can crack planets, quantum shields that deflect any energy weapon, living warships that grow stronger with each victory." As he spoke, holographic displays showed images of burning worlds and shattered fleets. The assembled aliens watched their own defeats play out in painful detail. Some species had fought bravely, others had tried to negotiate, but the result was always the same: total defeat in less than 6 months. "This is why the Galactic Assembly exists," Kexthul declared, "not as equals but as subjects who have learned to accept Zephyrian rule. You provide us with resources and labor, and we provide you with the mercy of continued existence." The hall remained silent except for the soft hum of the translation devices. No one dared to speak against the Admiral's words. No one except the newest arrivals to the assembly. Captain Jake Morrison of the human diplomatic vessel, UES Meridian, sat quietly in the back section reserved for newly contacted species. Beside him, diplomatic attaché Lisa Carter took careful notes on her tablet. They had arrived just 3 days ago, representing a species that most of the galaxy considered primitive. Admiral Kexthul noticed the humans for the first time, and his expression shifted to one of amusement. "Ah yes, our newest subjects. The humans from the small blue world called Earth. Tell me, Captain Morrison, how does it feel to represent a species that has barely left its home star system?" The other aliens turned to look at the human delegation. Many had heard rumors about these strange bipedal creatures who had somehow developed faster than light travel, despite their obvious technological limitations. Their ships were crude metal constructs, nothing like the elegant biovessels of advanced civilizations. Captain Morrison stood up slowly. He was a tall man with graying hair and calm blue eyes. When he spoke, his voice carried no fear or anger, just simple honesty. "Admiral Kexthul," he said with a slight nod of respect, "we appreciate you taking the time to educate us about galactic politics. It's always helpful to understand the challenges that other species have faced." The Admiral's scales flickered with confusion. This was not the response he expected. Most new species either cowered in terror or made foolish threats about their military might. "Challenges?" Kexthul repeated. "Perhaps you misunderstood, human. These were not challenges. These were demonstrations of Zephyrian superiority. Your species will face the same fate as all the others." Lisa Carter looked up from her notes. She was a young woman with short brown hair and intelligent green eyes. "Admiral, if I may ask, what was the longest any species lasted against your forces?" "The Nixari held out for 5 months, Kexthul replied proudly. "They were surprisingly resourceful, but ultimately no match for our adaptive warfare." 5 months, Carter repeated, writing it down. "And they used quantum computers and energy shields similar to your own technology?" Inferior copies of our biotechnology, the Admiral corrected. They tried to match our methods and failed, as all species do. Captain Morrison nodded thoughtfully. I see. So every species you've conquered tried to fight you using similar weapons and tactics to your own? Of course, Kexthul said, his voice carrying a hint of irritation. There is only one true path to military dominance, and the Zephyrian Empire perfected it millennia ago. The human captain exchanged a brief glance with his diplomatic attaché. Something passed between them, a look of understanding that the other aliens in the room completely missed. Well, Morrison said finally, I suppose that makes sense from your perspective. When you've been successful with one approach for 3,000 years, why change? Admiral Kexthul's scales turned a darker shade of red. Are you suggesting that the Zephyrian way of war is somehow flawed, human? Not at all, Morrison replied calmly. I'm simply noting that you've had consistent success against species that chose to fight you, using methods similar to your own. It's actually quite impressive. The Admiral studied the human captain's face, looking for signs of hidden meaning or mockery, but Morrison's expression remained neutral and respectful. Let me make something clear, Kexthul said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. If humanity is foolish enough to oppose the Zephyrian Empire, you will not last even 3 months. Your primitive metal ships and chemical rockets are no match for our living warships. I predict total human defeat within 3 days. Several alien delegates nodded in agreement. They had seen the human vessel that brought the diplomatic mission. It was a simple fusion-powered craft with basic shields and projectile weapons. Against Zephyrian bioships with their adaptive armor and plasma cannons, it would be like throwing stones at a mountain. Captain Morrison listened to the prediction with the same calm expression he had maintained throughout the conversation. When the Admiral finished speaking, Morrison simply said, "We appreciate the warning. We'll keep that in mind." His response drew confused looks from around the assembly. Some aliens wondered if humans were naturally cowardly. Others thought they might be too primitive to understand the threat they faced. Only Lisa Carter noticed the slight smile that crossed her captain's face as they prepared to leave the assembly hall. It was not the smile of a man who was afraid. It was the smile of someone who had just learned something very interesting about his enemy. As the human delegation made their way back to their ship, Admiral Kexthul watched them go with growing irritation. Something about their reaction bothered him, though he could not quite put his finger on what it was. Behind them, the Grand Assembly continued its business, unaware that they had just witnessed the first meeting between the galaxy's greatest military power and the species that would change everything. 3 weeks after the encounter at the Grand Assembly, every communication device on Earth received the same message. The Zephyrian Empire's ultimatum appeared on screens in every language, from the bustling cities of North America to the remote research stations in Antarctica. General Patricia Hayes stood in the command center of Earth's Stellar Defense Force, watching the alien message play on the main display. The general was a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and sharp eyes that had seen too many battles. Around her, dozens of officers worked at their stations, monitoring communications from across human space. Citizens of the primitive world Earth, Admiral Kexthul's image declared from the screen. The Zephyrian Empire hereby demands your immediate and unconditional surrender. You have 72 hours to respond with your acceptance of integration into our empire as a labor species. The Admiral's scaled face filled the screen as he continued his message. Do not mistake this for negotiation. This is your final opportunity to avoid the complete destruction of your species. We have granted you this mercy only because your primitive technology amuses us. General Hayes turned to her communications officer, a young man named Tony Martinez who had been monitoring alien broadcasts since first contact. Tony, make sure this message reaches every human colony. All 12 systems need to hear this. Yes, ma'am, Martinez replied, his fingers dancing across his console. Broadcasting to New Austin, Port Liberty, Haven Colony, and all the others. They'll have the full message within the hour. The ultimatum continued playing, showing holographic images of devastated worlds and broken fleets. Look upon the fate of those who opposed us, Kexthul warned. The proud Vortani now mine asteroids for our benefit. The technological Nixari build our war machines in their factory worlds. Even the warrior Bruthen serve as foot soldiers in our armies. Captain Rick Stone watched the same message from the bridge of the massive human dreadnought USS Defiance. The ship floated in the darkness beyond Pluto's orbit, far from prying alien sensors. Stone was a career military officer with 20 years of experience, but he had never seen anything quite like his current command. The Defiance was enormous by human standards, stretching over 2 kilometers from bow to stern. Unlike the organic curves of alien bioships, it was all angles and armor plating. Redundant systems ran throughout the vessel, and its hull bristled with weapons that no alien species had ever encountered. "Captain," said Lieutenant Commander Amy Rodriguez from the weapons station, "all kinetic bombardment systems are showing green. We've got full loads in all magazines." Rodriguez was the ship's weapons officer, a woman with dark hair and intense brown eyes. She had spent the last 5 years developing the weapon systems that made the Defiance unique among human warships. "Good," Stone replied. "What's the status on the main drives, Ben?" Chief Engineer Ben Clark looked up from his station. Clark was a big man with calloused hands who had worked on starship engines since he was 18 years old. "Fusion drives are running at peak efficiency, Captain. All 3 engines show optimal plasma flow. We can accelerate at 6 gravities for sustained periods." The bridge crew continued their preparations, while the alien ultimatum played throughout human space. Dr. Helen Woods, the ship's tactical analyst, reviewed intelligence reports at her station near the back of the bridge. Woods was a thin woman with bright red hair who had earned her doctorate in xenobiology before joining the military. "Captain," she said, looking up from her data screens, "I've completed my analysis of Zephyrian combat tactics based on the records from conquered species." Stone turned his chair to face her. "What did you find, Helen?" "Every species they defeated made the same mistake," Woods explained, calling up tactical displays on the main screen. "The Vortani tried to match their plasma weapons with plasma weapons. The Nexari used energy shields against energy shields. The Bruthan fought ship-to-ship duels using similar tactics to the Zephyrians." She highlighted sections of the battle records as she spoke. "They all tried to beat the Zephyrians at their own game. Energy weapons, bio-neural networks, adaptive armor. Every single one played by Zephyrian rules." "And that's exactly what they wanted," Stone said grimly. 3,000 years of fighting the same kind of enemy with the same kind of tactics." "Precisely," Woods agreed. "But we're not going to make that mistake." On Earth, General Hayes prepared to address the human population. She stood before cameras that would broadcast her message to every inhabited world in human space. Behind her, the Earth's moon was visible through the command center's windows, its surface dotted with military installations. "My fellow humans," she began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had never backed down from a fight. "By now you have all seen the Zephyrian ultimatum. They demand our surrender within 72 hours. She paused, letting her words sink in across 12 star systems. "I want you to know that we have been preparing for this moment since the day we learned about the Zephyrian Empire. Our intelligence services, our military planners, and our best scientists have spent years studying how they fight. In the asteroid belt, mining stations received the broadcast as workers gathered around screens. On the agricultural world of New Austin, farmers stopped their harvesting to listen. Even in the research colonies at the edge of human space, scientists paused their experiments to hear their general's words. The aliens believe we are primitive," Hayes continued. "They think our metal ships and chemical rockets make us weak. They assume we will fight them the same way every other species has fought them." Back on the Defiance, the crew listened to their general's speech while making final preparations. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez ran diagnostic checks on weapon systems that had never been tested in actual combat. Chief Engineer Clark monitored fusion reactors that generated more power than some small planets used. "But we are not like the other species," General Hayes declared. "We learned from their failures. While they tried to match Zephyrian biotechnology with inferior copies, we chose a different path entirely." She gestured toward the lunar installations visible through the window. "For the past decade, we have built a military force designed specifically to counter Zephyrian advantages. Not by copying their methods, but by making their methods irrelevant." Dr. Woods pulled up technical specifications on her screen, showing the Defiance's weapon systems to Captain Stone and his officers. "Their plasma weapons are devastating against energy shields," she explained. "But they've never encountered kinetic bombardment at relativistic velocities. Their bioships can adapt to energy weapons," added Chief Engineer Clark, "but they've never faced electromagnetic pulse weapons designed to disrupt organic neural networks." Captain Stone nodded as he reviewed the tactical data, and their quantum shields are perfect against directed energy attacks. But they were never designed to stop solid projectiles moving at significant fractions of light speed. The preparations continued across human space as the 72-hour deadline approached. In hidden shipyards, construction crews made final adjustments to vessels that looked nothing like traditional warships. In military academies, officers studied tactics that had never been used in galactic warfare. General Hayes concluded her address to the human population with words that would be remembered for generations. The Zephyrians have offered us a choice between slavery and death. But they have forgotten that there is always a third option. She looked directly into the camera, her expression showing the determination that had carried humanity from a single world to a dozen star systems. We choose to fight, not with their weapons, not with their tactics, and not by their rules. On the Defiance, Captain Stone sealed the final battle plans in the ship's computer. Around him, his crew completed their preparations with the quiet efficiency of professionals who knew their lives depended on doing their jobs perfectly. Captain, reported Communications Officer Lisa Martinez from her station. Message coming in from Earth Command. They're asking for our response to the Zephyrian ultimatum. Stone looked around his bridge at the men and women who would soon face the galaxy's most feared military force. They showed no fear, only determination and confidence in their training. Send this message to Admiral Kexthul, Stone said. Humanity respectfully declines the Zephyrian offer.
Tell him we look forward to discussing the matter in person. As the message was transmitted across space toward the Zephyrian fleet,
the crew of the Defiance made their final preparations for a battle that would determine the fate of their species. They had 72 hours to prove that human ingenuity could overcome 3,000 years of alien military dominance. In the depths of space, sensors detected the movement of massive bioships as the Zephyrian Empire prepared to make good on its ultimatum. The greatest military force in galactic history was about to encounter something it had never faced before, an enemy that refused to play by the established rules of warfare. Exactly 72 hours after delivering their ultimatum, the Zephyrian battle fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system. 12 massive bioships materialized in the darkness near Neptune's orbit, their organic hulls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that showed their readiness for war. Admiral Kexthul stood in the command chamber of his flagship, the Worldbreaker. The chamber was grown rather than built, its walls lined with neural tissue that connected directly to his thoughts. Through this living interface, he could feel the eagerness of his ship to begin the destruction of another primitive species. Report, he commanded, his forearms moving across control surfaces that responded to his touch like living skin. 12 bioships in formation, replied his tactical officer, a younger Zephyrian with bright green scales. All vessels showing optimal health. Plasma cannons are charged and ready. Quantum shields are at maximum strength. The Admiral's scales shifted to a satisfied purple color. This was exactly how he preferred to begin a conquest. Overwhelming force deployed against a helpless enemy, with the outcome never in doubt. Any sign of the human fleet? He asked, though he expected the primitives to be cowering behind their moon's defenses. Yes, Admiral, the tactical officer replied, confusion creeping into his voice. They appear to be waiting for us near the large gas giant. Sensors show multiple contacts. Kexthul's expression changed to one of surprise. In his 3,000 years of conquest, no species had ever positioned their fleet to meet his forces in open space. They always hid behind planetary defenses or in asteroid fields, hoping to use terrain to even the odds. Show me, he commanded. The chamber's walls lit up with sensor data, displaying the inner solar system in three-dimensional detail. Near Jupiter's orbit, a small fleet of human vessels waited in perfect formation. At their center was a single massive ship that dwarfed all the others. Interesting, Kexthul mused. The primitives have built themselves a proper battleship. How many vessels total? 15 human ships, Admiral. The large one appears to be some kind of command vessel. Our bioscanners show it's completely artificial. No organic components at all. The Admiral studied the tactical display with growing amusement. The human fleet was tiny compared to his own force, and their ships looked crude and angular compared to the elegant curves of Zephyrian biovessels. Open a communication channel, he ordered. Let me speak to their commander before we destroy them. It's always interesting to hear their final words. On the bridge of the USS Defiance, Captain Rick Stone received the incoming transmission with calm professionalism. Around him, his crew worked at their stations with the quiet efficiency that came from months of training for this exact moment. Admiral Kextel on the main screen. "Captain," reported Communications Officer Lisa Martinez. The alien's scaled face appeared on the display, his expression showing amusement mixed with condescension. When he spoke, his translated words carried the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. "Captain Stone," Kexethol began, "I am impressed that you chose to meet us in open space rather than hiding behind your planet's defenses. It shows either great courage or great stupidity." Stone stood in front of his command chair, his hands clasped behind his back. His uniform was crisp and his expression was respectful but unafraid. "Admiral Kexthel, thank you for honoring us with your personal presence. Indeed," the Admiral replied, "I wanted to give you one final opportunity to surrender. Your ships are outnumbered and outgunned. Spare your crews the suffering of a hopeless battle." Captain Stone glanced at his tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Amy Rodriguez, who gave him a slight nod. All weapons systems were ready and waiting for his command. "I appreciate the offer, Admiral," Stone said calmly, "but I'm afraid humanity will have to respectfully decline. We've come too far to give up without a fight." Kexthel's scales flickered with irritation. "Very well. You have chosen death over wisdom. Do not expect mercy when your ships are burning." "Understood," Stone replied. "Weapons free." The Admiral's image disappeared from the screen as both fleets prepared for battle. On the Defiance's bridge, the crew moved with practiced precision as combat systems came online. "All ships report ready for engagement," Rodriguez announced from her weapons station. "Kinetic bombardment systems are loaded and targeted. Electromagnetic pulse charges are standing by." The Zephyrian fleet began its attack with the same tactics that had conquered 47 star systems. The bioships spread into their traditional formation, their organic hulls glowing brighter as they channeled power to their weapon systems. "Plasma bombardment incoming," warned Dr. Helen Woods from her sensor station. 12 ships firing simultaneously. The space between the fleets lit up with streams of superheated plasma, the same devastating attack that had shattered planetary defenses across the galaxy. The energy beams struck the human formation with enough power to vaporize mountains, but the human ships did not vaporize. Their angular hulls were designed with ablative armor that scattered the plasma's energy. Redundant systems kept critical functions operating even when outer sections were damaged. The formation held steady, taking the punishment while preparing their response. "Minimal damage across the fleet," Chief Engineer Ben Clark reported. "All ships maintaining formation and combat readiness." Admiral Kexthel watched the results of his opening bombardment with growing confusion. No species had ever survived the concentrated plasma fire of 12 bioships. The human vessels should have been reduced to drifting wreckage within seconds. "Increase power to all plasma cannons," he ordered. "Channel auxiliary energy from the engines if necessary." But Captain Stone was not waiting for a second bombardment. "Amy, initiate kinetic bombardment. All ships execute attack pattern Delta." Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez's fingers moved across her weapon controls with deadly precision. "Firing," she announced. The human fleet's response was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen in space warfare. Instead of energy beams or plasma streams, the human ships launched solid projectiles accelerated to tremendous speeds by magnetic rails. Tungsten rods, each one precisely machined and perfectly dense, streaked across space at significant fractions of the speed of light. They struck the Zephyrian bioships with kinetic energy that made nuclear weapons look like firecrackers. The aliens' quantum shields, designed to deflect energy attacks, might as well not have existed. The tungsten projectiles punched through the protective barriers as if they were made of paper. 2 bioships suffered catastrophic damage in the opening exchange. Their organic hulls ruptured and bleeding atmosphere into space. "Impossible," Admiral Kexethol whispered, watching his sensors display damage reports that made no sense. "Their primitive kinetic weapons should not be able to penetrate our shields." His tactical officer's scales had turned pale with shock. "Admiral, the projectiles are moving at .2 light speed. Our quantum shields were never designed to stop solid objects at those velocities." On the Defiance, the crew watched their first salvo's results with grim satisfaction. The weapons they had developed specifically to counter Zephyrian technology were performing exactly as designed. "Direct hits on targets 7 and 11, Rodriguez reported. Both ships show massive hull breaches and power failures. Phase 2, Captain Stone ordered. Ben, initiate electromagnetic pulse sequence. Chief Engineer Clark activated systems that no alien species had ever encountered in space combat. The human ships launched specialized charges that detonated in carefully calculated patterns around the Zephyrian formation. The resulting electromagnetic pulses wreaked havoc on the bioship's neural networks. The organic computers that controlled their movements and weapons systems stuttered and failed as electric currents disrupted their biological processes. 3. More Zephyrian vessels found themselves drifting helplessly as their bioneural systems crashed. Their weapons fell silent. Their engines stopped responding and their defensive systems flickered and died. What kind of weapons are these? Kexthul demanded, his scales now showing the dark red color of rage and fear. No species fights this way. Dr. Woods monitored the battle's progress from her sensor station, tracking the effectiveness of weapons that human scientists had spent years perfecting. 5 enemy ships disabled or destroyed, she reported. Remaining vessels are attempting to adapt their defenses. But the human fleet had more surprises. Captain Stone's escort vessels deployed drone swarms that moved with coordination no biological pilot could match. The small craft attacked in precise patterns, overwhelming the bioship's point defenses. Meanwhile, the heavy cruiser USS Retribution, commanded by Captain Danny Walsh, brought its main weapon to bear. Nuclear-pumped gamma-ray lasers sliced through organic armor with surgical precision, targeting critical systems and life support areas. The tide of battle had shifted completely. What should have been a routine conquest for the Zephyrian Empire had become a nightmare of unexpected tactics and impossible weapons. Kexthul found himself facing something he had never encountered in 3,000 years of warfare, an enemy that refused to play by the established rules. The humans fought with weapons and tactics that made his superior technology irrelevant. News of the impossible human victory spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. In the Grand Assembly, alien representatives watched sensor recordings of the battle with growing disbelief. Species that had fallen to the Zephyrians in months saw primitive humans destroy half a Zephyrian battle fleet in less than an hour. Admiral Kexthul's retreat to Zephyrian space was the first time in 3 millennia that their forces had been defeated. The military council that governed the Empire met in emergency session within hours of receiving his report. High Commander Vextar, supreme leader of the Zephyrian military, stood before a holographic display showing the battle's key moments. His ancient scales bore the scars of countless victories, and his forearms moved with the deadly grace of a warrior who had personally conquered dozens of worlds. "Explain to me," he said in a voice that carried the weight of absolute authority, "how 12 of our finest bioships were defeated by 15 primitive vessels." Admiral Kexthul, his scales still showing the dark colors of shame and confusion, reviewed the tactical data one more time. "High Commander, they used weapons we have never encountered. Solid projectiles moving at relativistic speeds, electromagnetic attacks that disrupted our bioneural networks, coordinated drone swarms that overwhelmed our point defenses. These tactics," Vextar mused, studying the recordings, "they are completely outside our experience. No species has ever fought this way. Because no species has ever needed to," replied war strategist Zolken, the Empire's chief military planner. "Every civilization we have encountered developed along similar technological paths. Bioneural computing, energy weapons, quantum shielding, they all tried to match our capabilities with inferior versions of our own technology." The High Commander's scales shifted to a thoughtful blue color. "But these humans chose a completely different approach. They studied our victories," Kexthul said bitterly. "They learned from the failures of every species we conquered, then developed countermeasures specifically designed to neutralize our advantages." Vextar made his decision with the swift certainty that had made him the Empire's supreme military leader. "Mobilize the full war fleet, 300 bioships including the Destroyer of Worlds. We will crush this human infestation before their tactics can spread to other species." Meanwhile, in the command center of Earth's Stellar Defense Force, General Patricia Hayes coordinated with military leaders across human space. The victory at Jupiter had bought them time, but she knew the Zephyrians would return with overwhelming force. "Admiral Parker," she said, addressing the holographic image of Admiral Susan Parker, commander of the human home fleet. What's our current strength? Parker was a career Navy officer who had spent her life preparing for interstellar warfare. Her salt-and-pepper hair and steady demeanor reflected decades of experience in space combat. 53 vessels of destroyer class or larger, Parker reported, including 12 heavy cruisers and 5 dreadnoughts, all equipped with the new weapon systems. And our allies? Hayes asked. The mining colonies in the asteroid belt have converted 18 cargo haulers into armed transports. The agricultural worlds have contributed their patrol fleets. Even the research stations are sending what ships they can. Hayes nodded grimly. It was an impressive force by human standards, but nothing compared to the full might of the Zephyrian Empire. Their advantage lay not in numbers but in the unconventional nature of their warfare. Captain Rick Stone stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, now serving as the flagship for the combined human fleet. The great ship floated in the darkness between Mars and Jupiter, surrounded by vessels from every human colony. Some were military ships built for war. Others were converted civilian craft crewed by volunteers. "Captain," reported Dr. Helen Woods from her expanded tactical station, "long-range sensors are detecting massive movement in Zephyrian space. It looks like they're mobilizing everything they have." Stone nodded grimly. He had expected this response. The Zephyrians could not allow their defeat to go unanswered, not when their entire empire was built on the myth of their invincibility. "How many ships?" he asked. "At least 300, sir. Including something massive at the center of their formation. Our computers can't get an accurate size estimate, but it's larger than anything we've seen before." Lieutenant Commander Amy Rodriguez looked up from her weapons station. "Captain, all fleet units report ready for combat. We've distributed the new antimatter torpedoes to ships that can handle them safely." The antimatter torpedoes were humanity's most devastating weapon, developed in secret laboratories on the edge of human space. Each torpedo contained enough antimatter to destroy a small moon, but they required specialized containment systems and experienced crews to deploy safely. Captain Danny Walsh, commanding the heavy cruiser USS Retribution, had volunteered his ship to carry the first operational antimatter weapons. His science officer, Lieutenant Sarah Kim, had spent months learning to calibrate the containment systems. "Sarah," Walsh said from his command chair, "final status on the antimatter torpedoes." Kim was a brilliant young physicist who had joined the military specifically to work on advanced weapons research. Her calculations had made the antimatter torpedoes possible, turning theoretical physics into practical warfare. "All 6 torpedoes showing stable containment," she reported. "Magnetic bottles are holding steady, and the delivery systems are ready for deployment." As the human fleet prepared for the largest space battle in galactic history, other ships played equally important roles. The support vessel USS Logistics, commanded by the efficient Lisa Martinez, carried spare parts and ammunition for the entire fleet. Martinez had risen through the ranks by ensuring that human forces never ran out of supplies when they needed them most. Her ship carried everything from replacement tungsten, rods for the kinetic bombardment, systems to emergency medical supplies for battle. "Casualties, Captain Stone," she reported over the fleet. Communication channel. "All vessels have been resupplied and are ready for extended combat operations. We can maintain this fleet in battle for at least 72 hours without returning to base." It was a capability that no alien species had ever developed. While other civilizations focused on building more powerful individual ships, humans had perfected the art of logistics and fleet coordination. The Zephyrian fleet that emerged from faster-than-light travel was the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. 300 bioships arranged in perfect formation, their organic hulls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that showed their readiness for total war. At the center of the formation floated the Destroyer of Worlds, the Empire's ultimate weapon. The massive bioship was over 5 kilometers long, its hull covered in weapons that could crack planets. It had never been defeated in battle, never even been seriously damaged. High Commander Vexitar stood in the creature's neural command center, feeling its eagerness for destruction through the bio-neural link that connected his mind to the ship's consciousness. Around him, the greatest military minds in Zephyrian space prepared for what they believed would be the final battle of the human war. "All ships report ready for combat," announced Fleet Tactician Morden, Vexitar's senior tactical advisor. "The humans have positioned their fleet in the outer system, near the asteroid belt. Perfect, Vextar replied, his scales showing the deep red color of anticipated victory. They have trapped themselves away from their planetary defenses. We will destroy them in open space, then proceed to bombard their worlds until they surrender unconditionally. But as the Zephyrian fleet advanced toward the human position, Captain Stone was implementing a battle plan that would once again demonstrate the difference between human warfare and every other species in the galaxy. All ships, he broadcast on the Fleet Command channel. Execute Battle Plan Omega. Remember, we're not here to prove we're stronger than them. We're here to prove that strength isn't everything. The human fleet began to move in patterns that confused Zephyrian tactical analysis. Instead of forming up for a traditional ship-to-ship battle, they scattered into small groups that used the asteroid belt's cover to mask their movements. Stealth ships that could phase shift through dimensions appeared and disappeared like ghosts. Artillery vessels positioned themselves for long-range bombardment. Fighter carriers deployed thousands of autonomous drones that moved with inhuman precision. As the two fleets closed toward combat range, it became clear that this would not be a battle between two similar forces. It would be a test of whether 3,000 years of traditional warfare could overcome human ingenuity, adaptability, and their refusal to accept that any enemy was truly invincible. The largest space battle in galactic history was about to begin, and the outcome would determine whether humanity earned its place among the stars or joined the long list of species that had fallen before the Zephyrian war machine. The destruction of the Destroyer of Worlds sent shockwaves through the Zephyrian fleet that had nothing to do with the massive explosion. For the first time in 3 millennia, their ultimate weapon had been reduced to drifting wreckage by an enemy they had dismissed as primitive. High Commander Vextar found himself aboard a damaged escape pod, his flagship destroyed by a single antimatter torpedo that had penetrated every defense the Empire possessed. Around him, the remnants of 300 bioships struggled to process what had happened to them. The humans had not fought like any species the Zephyrians had ever encountered. They used the asteroid belt like a three-dimensional maze, appearing from impossible angles to strike with weapons that made no sense. Stealth ships that could phase through solid matter, artillery vessels that fired from beyond sensor range, drone swarms that coordinated with computer precision. Most devastating of all had been their logistics. While Zephyrian bioships needed time to heal and regenerate, human vessels were repaired and resupplied in the field. Support ships moved through the battle zone like mobile factories, keeping the human fleet fighting at peak efficiency throughout the 18-hour engagement. Captain Rick Stone stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, watching the last Zephyrian vessels limp away toward their home territory. His ship bore scars from the battle, but its redundant systems and modular construction had kept it operational throughout the fight. Casualty. Report, he requested from his medical officer. 43. Killed across the entire fleet, came the reply. 116 wounded, most already treated and returned to duty. Stone nodded grimly. Every loss hurt, but the numbers were far better than anyone had dared hope when facing the galaxy's most feared military force. Sir, reported Communications Officer Lisa Martinez, we're receiving a transmission from the surviving Zephyrian forces. Admiral Kexthul is requesting parley. The Admiral's image appeared on the main screen, but he looked nothing like the confident conqueror who had delivered ultimatums just days before. His scales showed the pale colors of defeat and confusion, and his forearms trembled slightly as he spoke. Captain Stone, he began, his translated words carrying none of their former arrogance. The Zephyrian Empire requests immediate cessation of hostilities. We are prepared to negotiate terms. Stone studied the alien commander with the same calm expression he had shown throughout their conflict. Admiral Kexthul, I accept your request for parley. However, I think you should understand that the terms will be humanity's to dictate. 3 months later, the Grand Assembly convened for the most important session in galactic history. The crystalline halls that had once echoed with Zephyrian boasts now hosted a very different kind of gathering. General Patricia Hayes stood at the speaker's platform where Admiral Kexthul had once proclaimed his species' invincibility. But instead of threats and demands for tribute, she carried an offer that would reshape the entire galaxy. Representatives of the galactic community, she began, her words translated into hundreds of languages. Humanity stands before you not as conquerors, but as neighbors who wish to build a better future for all species. The alien delegates listened with rapt attention. Many had spent centuries under Zephyrian rule, providing resources and labor to support the Empire's military machine. The idea that their oppressors had been defeated still seemed impossible to many of them. "We do not seek to replace the Zephyrian Empire with our own," Hayes continued. "We have no interest in ruling over other species or demanding tribute from conquered worlds. Instead, we offer mutual defense pacts, trade agreements, and technological exchange programs." Admiral Kexthul sat in the section reserved for former enemy representatives, his scales showing the muted colors of a warrior who had learned humility. Beside him, High Commander Vextar listened to words that challenged everything the Zephyrian military had believed about the nature of galactic politics. Dr. Helen Woods, now serving as humanity's chief xenological advisor, addressed the assembly about human military philosophy. Her research into alien combat tactics had proved crucial to humanity's victory, and now she shared the lessons learned with former enemies. "We studied every battle the Zephyrian Empire ever fought," she explained. "We learned from the mistakes of every defeated species, but most importantly, we learned that there is always another way to solve a problem." She activated holographic displays showing comparative military doctrines. The Zephyrians believed that superior firepower and individual ship strength determined victory. But we proved that coordination, adaptability, and logistics matter more than raw power. Captain Jake Morrison, the original diplomatic envoy who had first encountered Zephyrian arrogance, now worked alongside former enemy species to establish new trade agreements. The quiet captain who had listened politely to Admiral Kexthul's threats now helped negotiate partnerships that would benefit worlds across the galaxy. The key to lasting peace, Morrison explained to a group of alien trade representatives, is making sure everyone benefits from cooperation. When species work together, they all become stronger. The USS Defiance had become the flagship of a new kind of fleet. Instead of ships designed purely for conquest, Captain Stone now commanded vessels that served as mobile diplomatic centers, medical stations, and research platforms. The Great Dreadnought still carried its formidable weapons, but it spent more time delivering aid than fighting battles. "Sir," Lieutenant Commander Amy Rodriguez reported from her expanded duty station, "the Nixari delegation has requested a demonstration of our kinetic bombardment system. They want to understand how we achieved such precise targeting." Stone smiled at the request. The same weapons that had shattered Zephyrian bioships were now being shared with former victims of the Empire. Not the weapons themselves, but the principles behind them. Humanity's greatest strength had always been their willingness to share knowledge and learn from others. Chief Engineer Ben Clark found himself teaching courses on human engineering, principles to alien students who had once served the Empire as forced laborers. The big engineer who had kept the Defiance's fusion drives running during battle now helped former enemies build better ships for peaceful purposes. "The trick," he explained to a class of young Zephyrian engineers, "is redundancy and modularity. Don't put all your critical systems in one place, and make sure everything can be repaired or replaced in the field." The transformation of the galaxy proceeded faster than anyone had expected. Species that had been enemies for millennia found common ground in their shared desire for peace and prosperity. Trade routes that had been controlled by the Empire became open highways for all species. Captain Danny Walsh commanded one of the patrol fleets that maintained security along these new trade routes. The USS Retribution, once armed with antimatter torpedoes, now carried medical supplies and emergency aid to colonies in need. His science officer, Lieutenant Sarah Kim, had transitioned from weapons research to peaceful applications of antimatter technology. Her work on controlled matter-antimatter reactions now powered fusion plants across dozens of worlds. "Captain," she reported during a routine patrol, "we're receiving a distress call from the research station at Kepler 442. They're reporting equipment failures and requesting technical assistance." "Set course immediately," Walsh replied. "Let's go help some scientists." It was a response that perfectly captured the new galactic order. Instead of using superior technology to dominate others, humans used their capabilities to help and protect. The same ingenuity that had defeated the galaxy's greatest military power now served to build something better. Admiral Kexthul found himself in the strange position of serving as a military advisor to the reformed Galactic Council. His 3,000 years of combat experience, once used to conquer and destroy, now helped plan defensive strategies to protect peaceful worlds from raiders and pirates. "I do not understand," he confided to his aide during a break between council sessions. "The humans defeated us utterly. They could have demanded anything they wanted. Tribute territory slaves. Instead, they offer us partnership and friendship." His aide, a younger Zephyrian who had grown up believing in their species' superiority, struggled with the same concepts. "Perhaps, Admiral, they truly meant what they said. Perhaps they fight not to prove they are superior, but to protect what matters to them." The truth of those words became clear as the months passed. Human fleets patrolled space not as conquerors but as peacekeepers. Their advanced weapons remained ready, but they were used to protect the weak rather than dominate them. The galaxy learned that humanity's greatest weapon had never been their kinetic bombardment systems or their antimatter torpedoes. It had been their refusal to accept that any problem was unsolvable, any enemy was truly invincible, or any peace was impossible to achieve. In the final meeting of that historic session of the Grand Assembly, Captain Morrison delivered words that would be remembered across the galaxy for generations to come. "We learned something important during our conflict with the Zephyrian Empire," he said, addressing representatives who had once lived in fear of alien conquest. "We learned that the best way to win a war is to make it unnecessary." Admiral Kex Thul, his scales now showing the bright colors of someone